with that, I'm going to hand it over to our next speaker, Annie Hedgpeth.
Thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, I'm so happy to be here with you today. I used to be an organizer for DevOps Days back in Dallas when I used to live there. I live in Boulder now. But I know just how much heart and soul and love goes into this wonderful conference and work. So if you see an organizer, please be sure to tell them thank you and that they're doing an awesome job. All right, so let's get into why I care about this topic. So back long time ago, I got my degree in film, and I was a casting director for the very early part of my career, in Dallas though, so not, big time like here in LA. But fast forward to when I got into tech, and I chose DevOps specifically because DevOps has always been about people. And so I really wanted a people-centric job. And so I got my first job in tech at an Azure consultancy called 10th Magnitude in Chicago. It was very people-centric because it was a startup and it was a consultancy, so I got to work one-on-one with customers. And from there, I went to HashiCorp, where I was an engineer on the Terraform Enterprise team, and that was really people-centric just because it was like a super great culture on the team. I just really loved it. The Terraform Enterprise team is, at least at the time, it was the best team in the company. Anyway, and now my husband and I are doing a startup called Hedgpeth, where we're working on an app called PeopleWork. And in all these jobs, I got to immerse myself in deep technical challenges. So, like we all do, doing things like writing Terraform code for super handcrafted, artisanal legacy infrastructure migrations. One of them was for an app that was used to do MRI laser surgeries. So super technical, super scary, super stressful, very technical. Got to write a bunch of Go modules for a complete refactor of TFE services into their own containers. Again, lots of technical work. Now I'm doing something completely new, learning all new technology to create something from scratch. And in all of these things, it wasn't the technical challenges that defined my career. It's always been the networking challenges. So doing things like building trust and rapport with my clients to get them to believe me that, building CI/CD pipelines or whatever would save their bottom line, would contribute to greater productivity, etc. Those conversations were defining to my career. Managing people at the consultancy when I had no visibility into what they were doing day to day because we were on different clients, but getting them to create goals and a plan to achieve those goals. Those conversations were super defining to my career. Working on open source stuff and meetup stuff, just out of a desire to build community, all of that stuff would eventually lead to jobs, so that was super defining to my career. All of these things were ways in which I was able to define my career in a way that I felt like I could handcraft, something that I had agency over. And so, why should you care about this? Why should you care about networking? Well, let's talk through some scenarios that might be familiar to a lot of us. Okay, so try to think of either yourself or somebody else that you might know when you hear these. So, have you ever built a solution that you really believe in? Maybe it's an internal tool that could save hundreds of engineering hours, something like that, and you do everything right. Documentation, demos, training sessions, everything is just stellar, perfect. But 6 months later, adoption is minimal. And other teams, they appreciate your effort, but they just keep doing things the old way. It's not about your solution, it's something else, but what? You don't know. Or maybe you know the fixer. This is the principal engineer. They can solve any technical problem. Nothing scares them. This person, maybe they handcrafted a snowflake release of your product for your company's largest customer. And then the customer discovers this really nasty bug, so the fixer swoops in, spends 3 weeks heads down fixing this problem, saving the relationship with this client, maybe even saving the company because this is the biggest client. They need this person. But then, when the fixer goes and applies for the director role that just opened up, they get passed on. Why? They need this person, don't they? Or maybe you know the anchor. Maybe you are the anchor. The company announces a really super exciting new project using tech that this person has been studying on their own time. They're very excited about it. They express interest. They're like, hey, I've already been studying this on my own time. And then they discover that the team formed without them. Oh, they're so frustrated. So they're stuck on their existing team because they're the subject matter expert. And their vast technical knowledge is actually what's anchoring them in place just when they want to move on to a new, more exciting challenge. And this one, sadly, is very relatable nowadays. Maybe your company is restructuring, and the rumors have swirled for weeks, and you've been mulling over what you're going to do if you're affected. And in those moments, you panic because you realize that you've become an island. You've been so heads down in your current job, doing great work, that you realize that your professional connections have just narrowed over time, and you haven't maintained any relationships beyond your immediate team. So you get on LinkedIn and you put a bunch of comments on, hoping that that helps save your network, hoping that that's enough. Or maybe you feel like you're doing everything right. There we go. You're a manager, a great manager, and you spend so much time on your team's growth and development. You remove blockers for them left and right. You're their advocate. Your empathy for them is vast. They love you. You are their favorite boss ever. And then a director role opens up and you get passed on. Why? You're such a good manager. They overlook you because they don't see you as a manager of managers. Very frustrating. In all these scenarios, it's not the technical skills that are these people's limiting factors. It's their relationship skills. So, when AI can write your configs, what makes you valuable, or what makes you invaluable, is your ability to influence, collaborate, and navigate complex human systems. The good news is that we can apply systems networking concepts to our professional networks. And you're DevOps people, so you've definitely got this. We love tools that'll help us to have better efficiency. So let's figure out what a tool looks like for navigating these complex human systems. So I'm going to walk you through the steps that we would take to think about building out our professional networks by using the steps that we would take to build out our systems network. So we'll define and segment, firewall and automate, monitor and adjust. And I'm going to use examples that are more geared toward like your internal network at your company that you work at, but everything applies to your external network as well. It's just the examples will be for internal. And then I'll touch on external networks later. All right, so our challenge is that as technical professionals, we're trained to be very intentional about systems networking, but often just accidental about our professional networking. Many of us find ourselves investing time in professional connections that just kind of happen organically, when actually, if we were more strategic, it might be more beneficial. But it's totally natural because we build relationships with the people that we see every day. But the challenge is that sometimes the relationships that could truly advance our goals maybe will remain undeveloped or undernourished because a lot of reasons. Maybe they're just not in our daily path, or we're scared, or we don't know how to gain access to certain people. It Could be a myriad of reasons. And this isn't a personal failing, it's just a systems design problem, honestly. So, I know that everyone in this room loves solving problems, so let's get after it. So just as we would design infrastructure with clear architecture goals and access patterns for our systems, we can bring that same intentionality to our professional connections by defining our career goals and identifying people who can help us achieve them. So we know how to do this with systems networking. In a lot of these slides, I'm going to put systems networking on the left and professional networking on the right and how they kind of overlap. So we identify system architecture goals, like what does it need to do? What's its goal? Are we making an app? Are we making the software that's going to run the app? The infrastructure that's going to run the app? What is the goal of the architecture? We have to know that before we can build it, obviously. And then we need to determine the required connections and create subnets by function. So here you can see each function is subnetted. And then we apply the principle of least privilege. We're not just going to dump everything in a VNet and call it good. We're going to subnet everything out and apply rules. So we can tell that what this architecture wants to do pretty much just by looking at it and how it's divided. Because we know that security isn't achieved through complexity and obfuscation, it's achieved through clarity and intentionality. All right, so let's start to think about how we can draw out the system architecture for your professional network. So first, we want to define our career objectives. And I'm not talking about like your career matrix or your career ladder at your work. I'm talking about like, what do you want to do? Do you want to be the tech lead for your team? Do you want to be CTO? Do you want to start your own business? Do you want to just hike and ski with your family every weekend and let your job go on autopilot? Like, what is your specific goal? And then identify the key relationships needed to help you achieve those objectives. From whom do you want to share mutual support in order to achieve your goals? Who are the people that are going to help you get there? And I'll give you a hint, that number is going to be a lot smaller than you think it is. Because we have to remember Dunbar's number. We can only maintain about 150 meaningful relationships, and this includes your family and friends. So professionally speaking, who are those people for you? The higher the number, the less meaningful the interactions are going to be. So we need to think about this pretty strategically. All right, so then we need to define clear roles and access levels. And this is where you can start to think, oh, this is sounding a little weird. Like, these are people. And I'm not advocating for, like, exclusivity for the sake of gatekeeping or snobbery or anything like that. That's not what I mean by this. I just mean, let's be intentional about who we let into our trusted space based on your desired outcomes for your career. All right, so we're going to think of what our VPC of people would be, our VNet, or whatever your cloud is of choice. So try and think of the select people in your company that you want to create an intention for, to support and to be supported by. And you can do this by thinking of, like, who are you a fan of? Who's a fan of you? Who do you want to see succeed? And who do you think wants you to succeed? And these can be people anywhere in their careers. Some in front of you, some behind you. You really need a span of people. All right, so next I'm going to show you how I kind of subnet out my groups into roles. And you can use these same groupings too, or you can think of something on your own. What matters, I think, is, like I said, having that span. Some people in front of you, some behind you. All right, and note the numbers. These are like example numbers of like how many people would be in each subnet. These are not LinkedIn numbers. These are like small, intentional numbers of people. All right, so if you think of your stakeholders, these could be like literal project stakeholders. They could be mentors from your company. It could be anyone in your upward chain of command. Anyone who has a vested interest in the outcome of your work. Your goal for these people is you really just want them to vouch for you when you're not in the room. And they'll do this when you make them successful. Again, it's that mutual support that I keep talking about. Remember the advocate scenario, the manager who was like the best manager ever, and they couldn't move up? They likely spent all their time nurturing their direct reports that they didn't nurture any stakeholder relationships. And so when they were having that conversation about who was going to be director, nobody vouched for them. And maybe if they would have spent more time nurturing these relationships, maybe the outcome would have been different. All right, and then there's your first team, and these are like your close people. These are the people you work with every day. If you're a manager, it's like the other managers that report to your boss, plus maybe the product manager or something. And your goal with this team is you kind of want to get into the mindset of your boss by supporting your teammates' missions, which makes you more collaborative and less competitive with your peers, and ultimately more aligned with your boss's objectives. So remember that person who wanted to be on the new team, but they were anchored in place? It was that new tech they were all excited about, but they couldn't do it. Well, that person was likely never even considered for the role because they excelled so much at their role individually, and maybe they didn't support their first team or show alignment with their strategic priorities. And had they done that, they might have been seen more as a team player. All right, so then there's your direct reports. And these are the people who you're responsible for the outcome of their work. Whether you're a manager, tech lead, team lead, whatever, this number could be 0 because you could be a junior engineer and not have any direct reports, but it could be like somebody that you mentor even. So even if you're a junior, you could have like people that you're mentoring. Anybody that looks to you for guidance and leadership. And your goal for this group is to give them the support that they need so that they also want to support your mission. So remember the fixer, the staff engineer who saved the company with their Snowflake release? Well, while this person was busy being a hero, the rest of the team was kind of getting ignored and resentful, and they need their staff engineer to provide vision and leadership. And so this person would have benefited from being more intentional about leading the rest of the team with vision so that they could all share in a strategic mission. All right, so then there's your base. And to me, this is like the funnest group because it's the people that you choose more, like everybody else is kind of set in place sometimes. But these are the folks who you interact with less, but they're still really important connections because you're really like fans of each other, so it's kind of fun. Your goal for these people is just like support a good shared culture, do what's right, be a good person, and then just look for opportunities to support each other. So remember the builder, the one that created the internal tool that never got widespread adoption? Well, they probably could have spent more time on their base relationships, nurturing cross-team relationships, and maybe they would have gotten wider adoption that way. And I say those all as generic scenarios, but I know people that all of that stuff happened to. So our challenge, though, as we think of firewall and automating as our next step, is that without proper boundaries and automation, we face 2 real critical patterns in our professional relationships. So the first is the boundary deficit, where we just struggle to say no. And so this could be that manager who has 15-minute meetings all day, and they have to do their real work at night just to catch up. Or the engineer that becomes everyone's unofficial help desk. Or the SRE monitoring all the Slack channels just in case. And then the second pattern is the just-in-time networking trap, where we activate relationships only when they're needed. So this could be like approaching leaders during promotion cycle, or engaging stakeholders only when seeking project approval, or rebuilding external connections only when layoffs are looming. And I'll tell you a secret, they all know that it's that. They all know that it's the just-in-time trap. And it doesn't feel great on the receiving end. So the result is that we're spread thin across all these unfocused maintenance things, that we lack the bandwidth for actual strategic connection. And this forces us to be reactive exactly when authenticity matters the most. So just as you create firewall rules and CI/CD pipelines to maintain a protected system, set boundaries to protect your time and energy, and create systematic check-ins to maintain relationship consistency. Having a system like this in place and boundaries in place will help you to switch from being reactive to proactive, and that will ultimately give you agency. So when we think of our systems networking, create our inbound, outbound rules, build our pipelines, create automated checks, we do all this because we want rules and policies to create predictability and safety ultimately, right? For example, some random employee on another team isn't going to have access to like the key vault or the secrets manager that your team manages. And you think, well, that's pretty, you know, it's just a test environment or whatever. Does this mean that you don't trust the person? No, of course not. It just means that it's a system in place to protect you from the unexpected, to create predictability and safety. Because you know that if you left access open to the whole company, then your chance of your servers becoming crypto miners increases dramatically. It's just a rule in place for a reason. So then when we're thinking of our professional networking, we want to establish interaction patterns based on relationship types. So for instance, my interactions with an intern versus a VP are going to be very different approaches, but I have the same goal of mutual success with each. And then I want to set appropriate boundaries, because for those interactions with the intern or the VP to even take place, I need to have boundaries around my time and my energy so that I'm focused on what matters, not just on whatever's screaming for my attention in all the Slack channels, because I just don't want to spread myself too thin across too many weak connections. So with all of these weak connections, there's a purpose for all these platforms, right? Like, I love Slack for how it for how it enables remote work. I love LinkedIn for how I'm able to keep up with people. You know, all the things. They're all great for their own reasons. But just beware of low fidelity communication. When we're constantly just monitoring threads or slapping likes on everything, we can feel engaged, but we're just really missing deeper connections. So with those key relationships that you put in your VPC, that small number that I said, think about, could higher fidelity communication with those people better serve your goals? For instance, a Slack huddle is going to be way better than slapping an emoji on a comment. And then a lunch meeting is going to be even better than a Slack huddle. And an offsite is super high fidelity. So how can those higher fidelity interactions better meet your goals? And then establish regular check-in schedules with those key contacts. So set up recurring meetings and touch points. And by that, I don't mean like annual reviews or the occasional meetup or random DMs or whatever. I mean something more intentional and something more regular. Those are activities that could be part of a greater system, but they're just one-off activities. So think recurrence here. Because for true automation, for your professional network, we need to have clear definitions on it. So I know this sounds like overkill, but it's not, trust me. So you want to organize your people by stakeholder, first team, direct reports, and base, and then define clear intentions with each of them. So you want to define the recurrence of it, the medium. What are you going to do? Just put it, when you write it down, it happens. That's the point of this. And the format doesn't matter. You can have a Google spreadsheet. You can have a 1,000 calendar reminders. You can have an app that helps you. This is actually literally the automation that we're working on at my startup for the app called PeopleWork. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is having a proactive system that you'll actually use that makes the right thing to do the easy thing to do. Because a goal without a plan is just a wish. So realizing your goals is a lot more likely when we're intentional about all of these things. All right, so just as you track system health and watch for anomalies, track relationship health and watch for connection imbalances. All right, so in our systems networking, we're gonna track system health metrics, we're gonna monitor, we're gonna analyze performance patterns, because good monitoring systems will ensure that your policies are actually working, and they'll give you real-time alerts, and you'll be able to detect and respond before anything really bad happens. And we want to do the same thing with our professional network as well. We want to apply the same thinking to it. So if we're tracking our relationship health, that means like looking for things like reciprocity. Is there an even balance between who initiates, who benefits? Are you doing all the initiating, or are they? And then an energy balance too. Who's energizing, who's draining? Are you energizing? Are you draining? And then influence flow. Are your ideas gaining traction? Are you listening to other people's ideas? Look for all of that stuff, all of the balance between your relationships. And then do regular network health checks. So that just means looking for an internal, external balance. Like, don't just talk to your first team. Make sure that you're having cross-functional reach. Make sure that you have access to the decision makers. All of these things are really important for you to health check. And then adjust based on the data. And by doing that, I mean, once you have all of that data in front of you, then you can make decisions for your network. Like, you might need to prune the energy draining connections. You might need to strengthen the positive relationships, and then rebalance at some cadence. I think quarterly is probably good. But how do you do that? It feels really weird, right? Because we a lot of times want to think, well, they're humans, and I should just be able to use my intuition to figure all this out, because I don't want to, make everything so mechanical with human relationships. It feels weird. But here's my not weird approach, okay? So I want to take notes on everything. Every meeting that I have, I'm going to take some notes. I mean, maybe I'll skip some, but the important ones with these key contacts, I'm very forgetful, so I have to write down everything. If it's a one-on-one on a Zoom or something, it's great because I can take notes on the computer. If it's a coffee, I'll come home and then I'll take notes on what I remember. But I note two very important things. First, what happened. We talked about X, Y, and Z. My action items are A, B, and C, whatever, just facts. And then the second thing is, how did it make me feel? And I know that some of you are like, well, that's stupid. What does that matter? It does. The feelings are data. If I feel crappy after like 3 times of meeting with my mentor, then that's some data. Maybe there's a misalignment there, something's happening. Conversely, if I feel super positive the next 3 times that I meet with my mentor, then that's a sign that something's going really well. Maybe they're a really true ally. We're aligned in some really way. We can get stuff done together because we're really, vibing. Having the facts there can just help me to see, like, if I'm in the wrong about something or if I'm feeling negatively. So, you don't want to only rely on the feelings, but having the facts kind of checks some of your emotions as well. So having both of that data there at the same time is just a simple way of observability. Helps me to track things that I might miss otherwise. So not weird at all, I promise you. I think it's just good observability. All right, so all of this stuff applies to your external networks as well. And I think it's really important also, but the thing is, it just requires a lot more intentionality. I mean, obviously, it's the most easiest to nurture the relationships that are on your first team at your company because you see them all the time. But the challenge is to not only nurture those, but to even go outside your company walls. So even for outward-facing roles like sales, DevRel, etc., having a system in place helps you to focus your limited energy on where it really matters. Because the challenge is that we can all be like that island scenario, right? Where we're just deep in our exciting work and we're heads down and we only think about that and talk about that. And then our external connections just fade. And it's not intentional, it's just, we're human, we have limited bandwidth. But we've also seen the downsides to this. We've seen the 12-year veteran laid off, discovering that their external connections have vanished. We've seen the respected internal expert just completely unknown outside the company walls. The leader whose relationships have completely vanished during a restructuring. So, like disaster recovery, external professional networks work best as an ongoing practice, not an emergency response. Because the painful truth is that if you wait to build your professional network when you need it, you're months behind already. So doing it as an ongoing practice is the best approach. And automation is your friend here. Just put things on autopilot. That's my number one piece of advice to anyone that asks me about it. For example, when I needed mentors for my startup, I just contacted a couple people and I said, hey, I'm doing this thing. I need a mentor. Will you do it? They said yes. I said, great. Here's a recurring event on our calendars because I didn't want to have to get the time and energy to ask them every single time. So recurrence, yes. Another example is I have this hiking spreadsheet that I use for a lot of my base connections. And I said, hey, I just shared it with a bunch of my base network. And I said, hey, these are the hikes that I'm doing. This is the difficulty level. This is the date. This is the time. Put your name on it if you want to do it. And then I had somebody hiking with me every Saturday over the summer. Bottom line, put meaningful connections on autopilot. And you might think that this sounds impersonal, but it's actually not. I think it shows more care and intentionality when you do that because it shows the other person that you're putting care and you're putting thought into it and they're important to you. All right. So to sum it all up, if you're struggling to get promoted, to be taken seriously, to start your own venture, to get other teams to take you seriously, to be seen as a leader, whatever it is, I just really want you to try this method, honestly. I want you to try it and tell me if it works for you. Because the bottom line is our world isn't set up for these kinds of connections to happen naturally or organically. We all know the struggle that it is to maintain relationships. So my hunch is that those of you who are incredibly intentional about creating connections will really find a deep sense of satisfaction that's just hard to come by otherwise. I think also you're going to find a greater sense of agency and autonomy in your own career if you're able to track these things, and I believe that that's the absolute key to fighting burnout and to having greater vision for your career. So that's how to find me on the socials. I really do want you to try this and holler at me and tell me what you think about it. And that's all I have today. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah? Uh-huh.
It sounded like for your direct reports and your base, that was the mentor-mentee relationships. Am I correct in that assumption?
I would say that you could generically classify mentees in a direct report. They're obviously not your direct reports by HR's standards, but it's just kind of the way you think about it,
Sure.
It's just the idea that you're responsible for the outcome of their work. With a mentee, I think that you should, take on that feeling of being responsible for the outcome of them having vision for things, or things like that more generically. And base is a little different. It's more about sort of supporting a shared culture. They can be people in front of you or behind you in your trajectory. It's usually people that are kind of peer to you, I guess. But yeah, it's more sort of infrequent and informal relationships, I would say, as your base, that are hard to classify into those other three categories.
Okay. I was more so thinking about when you said that you wanted to start your startup, that you needed a mentor in regards to it and how you're reaching out to them. Do you specifically give them, as the mentee in that relationship, the intention in regards to what you want to do or what you expect out of that? And what do you do to salvage it when their advice or their connection is not necessarily applicable?
Yeah, that's a good question. My intention for the relationship can be completely, it has no bearing on what their intention for the relationship is. I would hope that, we both have a goal of mutual support, and I would hope that that would be their intention. But like my intention, is to do X, Y, and Z. And if they start, kind of like, maybe I don't want to do that, then that's just good information for me. I can't control them, obviously. And so I'm just going to say, okay, well, I guess I need to adjust. Maybe this isn't an aligned relationship that I thought it was. Maybe I thought that they were more a fan of me than they are or whatever, So you just, like I said, with monitoring, you just adjust based on the data. If they keep on canceling, then that's a sign that maybe it's not a good alignment, So does that answer your question? Kind of? Partially? What's left unanswered? Oh, what do you do to salvage it? I think that's when you just have to look at the data. Like, look at your notes and see, is it worth salvaging? It might not be. Are they giving you information that you're not aligned? Then you might just need to cut ties. Conversely, if maybe you're just doing something wrong and you need to like up your game in some way, then look at the data to see where you're lagging, Like maybe some of your feelings at one meeting were, oh, I felt like they were disappointed in me because I missed X deadline or whatever, Then you're like, oh, okay, well that's data. I just need to finish this part of the thing or whatever, Just bottom line, look at the data to make those decisions. Not all relationships have to be saved, Like the point is you want to be strategic about them. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Yes. You said something really good there. So he's saying if you're looking for a job, how do you stay on somebody's mind? And because that's obviously your goal is you want your professional network to help you out. You want to have mutual support. And I think that by just asking people about their problems and thinking of ways that you can help with them. So let's say that you were meeting with one of your base connections. And you don't want, like I said in there, you don't want to just activate relationships when you need something. You don't want people just to feel like you're taking. You want to be a giver also, right? And so you can just meet with people without the requirement that you get something in return, but that you can be truly curious about what their needs are and say, hey, what are you working on nowadays? And then just, oh, well, what's your biggest problem right now? And then just kind of help solve problems with them and be interested in supporting them in whatever it is. It'll be different with every person. Obviously, they'll have different needs, and you have limited bandwidth as well. But just talking about and seeing ways in which you can have alignment where you can come in and like help in some way, you know? That would be my biggest piece of advice, I guess, is just to get curious about where you can serve your connections, you know, and be a mutual support. Does that help? Okay. Anybody else?
Annie, I think we're actually at time.
Oh,
So
thank you. Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
so much.
All right, thanks, y'all. This was fun.